마이크 샌드 교수님, 안녕하세요.
Very good, and it's good to be with you.
최근에 코로나19로 인해서 모두가 힘든 시기를 보내고 있는데 교수님은 어떻게 지내고 계신지 궁금해요.
Well, I've been staying at home. I'm right now in my house near Boston in Massachusetts, and I've been here since March, since the pandemic began. My Harvard teaching has been done entirely remotely this semester. So, except for walks outside, I've been in my house the whole time.
Hi, Professor Sander. I'm not really sure you remember me. We did a talk in May through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
I do.
Okay, great. How have you been?
Good. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you again too. I read your recent publication, the book Tyranny of Meritocracy. So it reminds me of the tyranny of the majority. Did you get the title out of that, or?
Well, it's similar. You're right.
Yeah.
It is similar to the phrase, the tyranny of the majority.
Right.
But the tyranny of merit, of course, has a different meaning, which I'm sure we will discuss.
저도 교수님 책을 굉장히 흥미롭게 읽었는데 사실 요즘 한국 사회에서는 그 2030 세대들이 말씀하신 것처럼 공정하지 못한 사회에 대해서 굉장히 불만을 갖고 분노하고 있는 것 같아요. 이제 교수님이 가르치는 미국의 2030 세대, 그 하버드 학생들의 의견은 어떤지 궁금합니다.
I think there is a similar kind of anxiety among young people in the U.S. to what you've described in South Korea. For those who were born a couple of generations ago, people who were born in the 1940s could assume that they would rise, that they would do better than their parents. And in fact, 90% of those born in the 1940s did better than their parents. Of those born in the 1980s, only half did better than their parents. So the idea of upward mobility through effort and hard work, social mobility has stalled. And I think young people especially are worried and anxious and frustrated about this. And I think this has contributed to an intensification of competition among young people.
최근에 분석을 보니까 이제는 상위 1% 내지는 이제 부잣집 아이들이 좋은 대학을 가고 또 좋은 직업을 구하는 이런 상황이 너무 심각해졌다라고 이제 지적을 하셨더군요.
We see that the ability to score well on standardized tests like the SAT in the US or the Sunyoung in South Korea, the ability to score well depends a lot on coming from a family that can afford to prepare students with private tutors, to prepare them for the standardized test, to prepare them to do well in school. And so the result is that in the US, that the higher your family income, the greater the likelihood of getting a high score on the SAT. So what began as a test for equal opportunity actually reproduces the advantages of an unequal society.
그게 한국에서도 이제 그런 경향성이 굉장히 뚜렷해지고 있는데 그래서 어떤 해결책이 있을까요?
I make a provocative proposal. I don't know whether or not you will agree with this, but tell me what you think. That, well, take the example of Harvard. Harvard gets over 40,000 applicants for only about 2,000 places. Most of those 40,000 are well qualified to do the work and to succeed at Harvard. Those who are not well qualified be excluded, be culled out, separated out. But of the remaining applicants, maybe 25,000, maybe 20,000 of the remaining applicants, we conduct admission by lottery. I call it a lottery of the qualified.
Well, but you have to go into like 25,000 people to be qualified to be drawn, right? And
Right.
that already have some cutoff line. And I'm not really sure that can be a fundamental transformation or change for this meritocratic role of the universities.
I agree with you. I think you're right. This is a modest proposal that would only be one very small step to remind everyone. But the reason for the lottery of the qualified that I propose is first to remind students and their parents of the role of luck that is already present in the system of university admissions. To make those who are admitted perhaps a little bit more humble, and to send a message to those who are not admitted that there is a lot of luck involved, and their lack of success in being admitted is not entirely their fault. Maybe this would go some way toward reducing the intense stress and pressure on students and the pressure that their parents put on them, which I think has reached unhealthy proportions.
저도 그렇고 요즘 친구들 같은 경우는 그 수능이라는 그 점수 체계나 대학의 레벨 같은 게 너무나 당연하다고 생각하잖아요.
네.
저 자체도 이게 공정한 거야 라고 생각했던 때가 있는 것 같아요. 그게 어쩌면 나의 착각일 수도 있겠다.
근데 뭐 우리 사회 서열주의나 학벌주의라는 게 뭐 어제 오늘의 얘기는 아닌데, 제가 볼 때는 저희 때보다도 훨씬 더 심해지고 있는 게 뭐냐면 도시와 지방이에요. 서울과 지방이죠.
네. 저는 그거를 기술이 깰 수 있을 거라고 봐요.
네.
왜냐하면은 지금 사실은 가장 심각하게 이런 엘리트 의식이나 학벌이 중요한 이유는 4년 동안 같은 캠퍼스 안에서 생활한다라는 그 기억인 것 같거든요. 그러니까 하나의 시공간의 기억을 공유한다는 게 그 사람들의 유대감을 강화시키는 것 같아요. 근데 만약에 이게 온라인 수업이 많이 보편화되고서 누구든지 어느 대학의 수업을 다 들을 수 있고 지금처럼 그 학교에 내가 가서 수업을 듣지 않아도 되는 시대가 되면은 더 이상 같은 학교에 나오더라도 유대감이 안 생기거든요.
지금만 해도 그렇잖아요.
지금 요번 신입생들이
못 가니까.
1년 동안 거의 대학을 캠퍼스를 안 갔단 말이에요. 저는 질문이 하나 있는 게 과연 다음 세대에도 대학이라는 게 과연 필요할 것인가?
I think universities will continue to exist, though you raise an interesting question about what role they will have. I'm criticizing the role of universities as gatekeepers to opportunity. When universities become gatekeepers, their function as gatekeepers, as providing credentials for certain jobs and social status, most people in our societies do not have a 4-year university degree. In the US, nearly 2/3 do not. Now, South Korea has a higher proportion of people with college degrees than most any other country. So I think we do have to take more fundamental steps.
그 교수님께서 한국 사회는 대학 문화가 좀 다르다라는 얘기를 하셔서 거기로 좀 돌아가 볼까 하는데, 한국에서 굉장히 핫했던 드라마가 있습니다. 스카이캐슬이라고. 상위 0.1%의 부모들이 자신의 자녀를 정말 좋은 대학에 보내기 위해서, 또 최고로 만들기 위해서 고군분투하는 내용을 다룬 드라마인데요. 실제로 이런 일이 있었을 거다, 정말 공감하는 분들이 많았거든요. 미국에도 좀 비슷한 사례가 있는지 궁금해요.
Yes, and I've heard about Sky Castle, and I want to watch it now. I'm looking forward to watching it because I think the message of Sky Castle is very close to the message of my book, The Tyranny of Merit. We had a scandal not long ago that illustrated this. There was a corrupt college consultant who offered parents, affluent parents, some of them celebrities, with students who were applying to college, but who didn't quite qualify for the top universities. He offered them corrupt ways, if they paid him money, to falsify their applications, to enable them to take SAT exams, entrance exams, with proctors he paid off to correct their answers. He even created false pictures of the student applicants showing that they were great athletes, because athletic performance sometimes helps for admission to American universities. So this was a scandal. The parents and this corrupt consultant were prosecuted. The FBI investigated, and they brought charges against these parents. What's interesting is that the parents, many of them, did not tell their children what they were doing. They didn't want their children to know. They wanted their children to believe that they had been admitted on the basis of their own merit.
According to recent public opinion polls, only a half of Koreans believe that you can be successful. I mean, even if your parents are not really successful or poor.
Yes. Well, it is interesting, and I've heard this phrase, tell me if I have it right, that a dragon can rise from a stream.
Exactly.
So that's the Korean version
Right.
of the American dream of rising from rags to riches. The dream of upward mobility. What's interesting about that poll, the poll that you mentioned, and I've read about it as well, many Koreans don't believe that anymore that dragons can rise from a stream. Actually, I think that this awareness of the limited opportunities for mobility, especially if you come from a poor family, this awareness is a good thing because it's the beginning of what could be a public debate about how to achieve a more just society, a more fair society. In the US, when similar opinion polls are conducted, it's interesting. Most Americans continue to believe that it's possible to rise from rags to riches, that a dragon can come from a stream. Most Americans say, yes, that's true. Despite this fact, the belief in the American dream persists.
근데 현실은 그렇지 않은데도 불구하고 미국인들은 왜 아직까지도 아메리칸 드림을 그렇게 믿고 있다고 기대하고 있는 건가요?
There's also the fact that America is an immigrant society. And so many families are aware that their parents or grandparents arrived as immigrants, often with almost nothing. And they worked hard and they sacrificed so that their children could get an education and could succeed and rise. So in many ways, the continued American faith and belief in the American dream of upward mobility is not an adequate response to the inequalities that we've seen in recent decades. Nor is the promise of attending university and rising an adequate response to inequality. We need to broaden our approach to inequality. We need to broaden our debate about the meaning of a fair society to focus not only on individual mobility, but also on creating a sense of community, a sense of solidarity, a sense of obligation for those less fortunate than ourselves. This ethic of community, the sense that we are all in this together, that's the only way to deal with the effects of inequality.
근데 사실 중요한 거는 그거잖아요. 그러니까 아까도 얘기가 나왔지만 이렇게 뭐 돈을 더 올려준다든지 사회 복지를 더 증가를 시켜준지 뭐 이런 시스템적인 부분도 중요하지만 그 사회 구성원이 내가 이 사회에서 얼마나 필요한 사람인가를 깨달을 수 있게끔
맞아요.
넌 정말 이 사회에서 아주 중요한 역할을 하고 있어. 이 이야기를 계속 해줘야 된다는 거거든요.
And this is what we've seen in the United States with the populist backlash against elites. The populist backlash against elites draws on the anger and resentment of many working people who feel they are looked down upon and that their opportunities to rise are not what they were. And I think this contributed to the election in 2016 of Donald Trump, who ran a campaign appealing to people's anger and resentment. White voters without a college degree, in 2016, 2/3 voted for Donald Trump. And in 2020, 2/3 voted for Donald Trump. After one of his victories in the early primaries, he declared in his victory speech what may seem like a strange phrase. He said, "I love the poorly educated." And what he meant by that was he understood that many working people felt looked down upon by elites, by college-educated elites, professional elites, meritocratic elites. So I think a lot of the reason for the persisting support among working people for Donald Trump is not that he made them better off economically. He didn't, for the most part. I think it has more to do with the fact that he articulated the sense of resentment they feel, the sense of being looked down upon.
교수님, 그 미국이 지금 굉장히 코로나19, 코비드 19 때문에 굉장히 고통받고 거진 1년 동안 계속되고 있는데요. 교수님, 이번에 화두로 던지신 능력주의라는 측면에서 보면 이 코로나19, 이 글로벌 팬데믹은 어떻게 영향을 준다고 보십니까?
During this pandemic, we've seen a dramatic display of the inequalities that were already present in our societies. Only now, inequalities of income and wealth and work are reflected in who can work from home and who, in order to work, in order to make a living, has to go out and face the public and expose themselves to risk. I'm thinking also of delivery workers, warehouse workers, grocery store clerks, truckers. These are not the best paid or the most honored members of our society. I think this moment of recognizing the work being performed by essential workers, many of whom do not have college degrees, but we recognize that we all depend on them. And so I think that we could turn this moment of recognition and of gratitude and of appreciation into something more enduring if we use it as a starting point for a public debate.
팬데믹이 이런 불평등한 구조에 대한 미국을 비롯한 모든 세계 시민들의 자각을 주는 계기가 됐다는 건 굉장히 중요한 일인 것 같아요.
Is there any last word that you would like to speak to your Korean fans? You have a huge fan here.
I think one element that we should not forget are the attitudes towards success with which we began our discussion. The successful, those of us who manage to succeed in this economy, have a tendency to assume that our success is our own doing. This gives rise to the hubris that leads us to look down on those less fortunate than ourselves and that erodes social solidarity and community. Because if I believe that my success is entirely my own doing, it's hard to picture myself in other people's shoes. It's hard to feel a sense of responsibility for those less fortunate or credentialed than me. And so I think the civic virtue we need most today is somehow to recover a sense of humility, an appreciation of our indebtedness to luck, but also to those who helped us on our way. Finally, I would like to say, a word of thanks to my Korean readers and to Koreans who have been watching this program.